So, I wanted to hop on here and talk about the importance of self care in every season. So, as you can see, I have the little one sleeping on me right now. But I just had this topic on my mind, and it's something that I've been passionate about over the years. And I feel it's just important to get the message out, even if it's like, beating a dead horse. Is that even the saying? I don't know. But, if you've heard it 1,000 times, maybe you just need to hear it on this day, in this moment from this person. As someone who has experienced, the importance of self care both professionally as a social worker and applying it in my own life, I am just so grateful that someone, gave me permission to practice self care at times in my life that I may have gone without it. And those are the times, the more difficult, challenging times, that we really need to ramp it up. And it doesn't mean it needs to look lengthier or that you need to spend more money on it or drastically change it. It's about implementing little things intentionally and knowing that what you need spiritually, physically, emotionally can change and will change season to season. And you really need to make sure that you're aware of that, because you can easily fall into feeling sad or regret or upset because you're trying to implement self-care in a way that worked in the past and doesn't work in this season of life. And so an example, of course, is postpartum. Prior to getting pregnant and even through my pregnancy, I was, going to spin classes several times a week, and that's what worked for me. That was one form of self-care, and I call it more like self-maintenance, something related to like physical appearance, although it was also tied to health, like getting your nails done. That's kind of self maintenance, but self care doesn't have to be that, right? Self care for me in this season of life really looks like, setting the baby down to make a cup of coffee in the morning. It also looks like getting out of bed a little bit before he wakes up. Even if I'm tired, I've realized I enjoy that kind of quiet time more. I find that more beneficial than maybe 30 minutes more of sleep. For me, it looks like saying yes and sometimes saying no, right? Saying no and setting boundaries, not overdoing it, not overscheduling, but also saying yes to things that you enjoy, that you may say, well, maybe it's not, it's going to be too difficult to bring a baby, or I can't do it with the baby. I'm all about, babies come into our lives, we don't come into theirs. They can definitely be incorporated in so many different things. Obviously, it'll look a little bit different, but you don't want to just like kind of close the door completely on your old identity. Sometimes self-care is, eating healthy. Sometimes it's having the piece of chocolate cake at an event, right? So it can look very different and day to day, minute to minute. So I would say it's something that you should assess maybe every 6 months or so. For me with a baby, this could be even every month, because his needs and his routine is changing so drastically that I'm starting to know, like, I can put a little more effort into getting ready in the morning now that he's 2.5 months. Whereas the first few weeks, that was really difficult and it caused me more stress, putting pressure on myself to do so. Therefore, it was counterproductive. So, whatever it is for you, say every 6 months, assessing 10 important, self-care actions that you can do that maybe you can divide them into, time, how much time it takes. If you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, right? If you have a couple things that take an hour, a massage or, a workout, a couple things that take 5 minutes, making your coffee, cleaning up your space, which I heard recently that that was self-care for somebody. And I had been kind of fighting it for so long. I felt like keeping a clean space meant work. And while it does, I find that it is also self-care for my personality type. I like a clean space. It helps me think clearer, and it can be really, distracting to have a cluttered space because I'm constantly thinking about it and looking at it, and that's just not self-care, right? So it again, some people may be able to work in that environment. It doesn't bother them. That sounds amazing. I wish I was that person. Some people can't go without working out a day. I can do that, but I am implementing in this season, walks now. So I'm not cycling or going to the gym as of right now. I do plan to go back to the gym eventually when he's sleeping a little bit longer, but right now it looks like walks and setting new goals within that. Maybe trying to reach 10,000 steps a day. That's not something that I would have done had I been going to cycling or to the gym. So yeah, self-care, I was told when I was in my master's program, or maybe even my bachelor's program. My bachelor's and master's are in social work. So there was an emphasis on self-care, because it's such a high burnout rate in that field. You're dealing with a lot of trauma and, substance, alcohol abuse, mental health, homelessness, all of these things. And so it's really important to take care of yourself because you can't pour from an empty cup. Right? On top of that, some people have really high caseloads. It can be a lot. So I'm glad that I was, kind of given permission to practice self-care, as well as being a student at the time. That was really important, right? So taking time to get physical movement. And I remember when I was doing my master's, my daughter was also homeschooling. I have a 15-year-old daughter, so she may have been like 10 or 11 at the time. And because everything was shut down, I was doing online courses. Our self-care then looked like a walk in the morning before I started my either classes or internship or going into work. I had a part-time job, and she had school, right, from home. So it meant going for a walk or a jog while she was riding her bike. And I look back and I really love those memories. And I'm glad that I pivoted, because I don't really want the same routine, my whole life, right? So it's nice to kind of implement and shift with the seasons rather than say, you know what, like my gym is closed, I'm working from, she has homeschool, we're not going to move our bodies today, right? And same with a newborn. Just because I got a little less sleep last night doesn't mean that I can't do it. And I love looking to other people for inspiration, for self-care, what they're doing. I love looking at other moms who maybe even have 2 or 3 kids that are making time for self-care, or 2 or 3 little ones, because I feel like when I see people doing it, who have every reason not to, I find myself having less excuses, right? If someone's doing it with twins, then why can't I do it with one newborn, if that makes sense? So self-care too is definitely, individual. So I really, really recommend identifying, some self-care practices and implementing them on a daily basis. You can also, look at what is completely free or what you may need to pay for and then implement that accordingly. Again, so many free self-care practices. Taking a nap for me was self-care during my pregnancy. Listening to a podcast while breastfeeding in the night is self-care, because it's something that, I don't necessarily love having to get up in the middle of the night, but if I have something like that where I can learn and feel inspired, I love to do that. I'm not, I'm not really into like reading right now, but I do want to do that in the future. And that might be another kind of self-care practice that you can implement, reading a book or just getting into some hobbies that you really enjoy. It can be making a hot tea at night before bed. It can be taking a hot shower, going to the spa, meeting up with a friend, going out for coffee instead of making it at home. It could be going through the drive-through. Honestly, like for me, some of the highlights right now in this postpartum, stage is taking a hot shower, going through the Starbucks drive-through, doing a 15-minute workout with weights, whereas a year ago it was, lifting heavy weights by myself in the gym, after dropping my daughter at school. It was, like going into a cafe and getting a coffee and sitting down. It was, going out, staying out late with my husband and taking an overnight somewhere. There's so many different seasons of life, and I know this stage isn't forever, so I'm really trying to enjoy it. And I think that's the beauty in having such a large age gap with my children. They're 15 years apart. I know how quickly it moves. I know, that this stage isn't forever, and that there's pros and cons in every season, and it's about making the most of them and pivoting during them and taking care of yourself without excuse throughout all of it. There will always be someone that needs you. There will always be life pulling you in many different directions. But if you don't secure the mask on your face, the oxygen mask, before securing it on others, then you will be doing a disservice not only to yourself but to them. So think of yourself as, the center of whether a family or just center of your life, and it's something that needs to be preserved. And it is not a marathon. It's not a race, it's a marathon. So, you don't need to do these drastic things one off. You need to just implement daily habits through and through, year after year. And yeah, I mean, my dad is in his late 70s, and he's always been really good about demonstrating that. He goes to the sauna, he swims laps, he meditates, he goes to church. He has so many different practices that he's implemented, all of my life. I'm 36 now, so I think it's really inspiring to see. And I've seen how it kind of grounds him, and how he's still so full of energy and life at this time in his life. So that's all. Comment below what your self-care practices are, what you've had to pivot or change during different seasons, whether it's after a baby or going to school, starting a new job, getting married, losing a loved one. There's so many different life circumstances, changes in jobs, right? If you change jobs or move cities, you have to find your groove, and you have to be intentional about, practicing self-care in different ways than maybe before. So yeah, if you want to comment below, I will see you next time. Bye.